Over time, science has gone from being an outsider discipline to being a dominant force deciding the fate of our society. How has this changed society, and have these changes been for good or for bad? These are obviously complicated questions, as I'm sure you've guessed already, and they require a lot of thought and debate. Science has made us rethink our existence. We've gone from believing that we were the center of the universe to understanding that we're in fact more like a small speck of dust floating around in the grandeur of space. This has strong implications for the sense of meaning that is so important to us humans. This is going to be a personal and probably quite a critical take on science, maybe too critical for some, and it'll probably end up being more of a commentary on where society is going in general. So hopefully you can bear with me for that. Yeah, as a good old pessimist, obviously, I'm going to start off with the good so that we can finish up with the negatives, although I'll try to make this not sound too sad or conspiratorial. Let's start off with the good. Science has brought along some considerable advances that people would be hard-pressed to disagree with. Without science, for example, our life expectancy might be half what it is now. Science has allowed humanity to pull people out of hunger, although this is obviously not true across the board, or at least it's not true yet. It's also allowed people to gain a more comfortable lifestyle. Again, not necessarily true, but in general I think we could probably agree that it has done. Everything we have, from cars to sofas to pens to phones, well, they have their origins in some sort of scientific discovery or the creation of some sort of scientific technique. There are, luckily I would say, not only immediate material benefits to science. Science allows us to quench our thirst for knowledge, and it allows us to satisfy our curiosity. So I don't know, how do stars work? How do trees interact between themselves? And how does this shadow project itself onto the wall? Well, you know that it's because I've got a light, but that does require some sort of scientific reasoning, and there's something that's in us that satisfies us to understand what's going on around us. This is obviously a very positive thing. I say this is obviously beneficial, but maybe that's untrue, but I can't see anything that's particularly wrong about looking around oneself and understanding what's actually happening. So I think that's good, and I hope most people can agree. The levels of knowledge and understanding that we have of the world, this is what defines us, or at least this is what differentiates us from other species that we know of, at least. In this sense, searching for knowledge and understanding has immediate value, and therefore so does science, especially as it is one of the main machines that generates knowledge and understanding. I hope you agree in the fact that this is a relatively logical chain of reasoning. To sum up on the positives, well, we're going to see how positive it really is. Our modern, connected, technological world exists in great part thanks to science. Not to forget, of course, that all the knowledge that we have is generated, or at least in a large part, thanks to science. The change that science has brought along is, in my opinion, almost impossible to deny. You might notice I use the words change here and not progress, and here lies the problem. People often say that science only brings progress, or science is done in the name of progress, but this may not necessarily be the case. Why is that, one might ask? And another could respond, I don't know. What could possibly be wrong with science and progress? And these two lovely people lead us quite nicely onto my more skeptical view. I mentioned earlier that science is one of the major disciplines that generates knowledge and understanding, but it's not the only one, and it's important to remember this. Society is slowly closing its eyes to ideas that aren't necessarily scientific. If your idea isn't scientifically backed up, it has a much higher chance of not standing the test of time. I think, for example, that the decline of religion is largely due to the rise of science. This obviously has its good aspects and maybe some more negative ones. The closed-mindedness that is so criticized in religious ideas is beginning to appear in the so-called scientifically minded. I know the science is sort of becoming the new word of the Lord, and if you know the science, you must be listened to unconditionally. Science is therefore, in some cases at least, a little bit of an overused method of validation. Someone who argues that he's looked at the science automatically gets the higher ground. This is the pretentiousness of science, and it must definitely be watched with caution. I'm by no means saying that it's happening all the time, but I think this sort of observation can probably be made more and more often nowadays. I say nowadays as if I'm 75 years old, but I'm not, and you know what I mean anyway. Now, to move on to another aspect, science is always used in the name of progress, but this is a very loose term and very little thought, I think, is actually put into what progress means. Thanks to science, for example, we spend hours a day glued to a screen. Wonderful. Thanks to science, machines are doing more work than ever to release us from our difficult or tedious tasks and to release us from our responsibilities. This may have some benefits, but is it all good? Well, who knows? Up to you to make your mind up on that. In the attempt to explain everything, science has also become a means for some to undermine aspects of life that are so important to us humans, like beauty, enjoyment, pleasure, or fulfillment. Again, is this good or bad? I don't know. Someone like, I don't know, what's she called? Melissa? No, it's not Melissa. Sabine, that's right. Sabine would probably think enjoyment, rubbish. And, you know, so is fulfillment and pleasure. Okay, that last bit might have been a little bit cynical, and it probably was, but no matter. I'm sure Sabine wouldn't actually mind. Now we can finish up because I think we're going to be out of time soon. Science is one of humanity's great undertakings, but in our thirst for never-ending progress, we must question what is actually good for us, and despite our need to always keep going, we must acquire the humility to keep working on science without undermining all the things that characterize us as humans. That's it. Forgot to turn the light off.